We like the Raging Granite. We see you all over the place. For years now.
Hello!
Hello!
Hi everybody, how's everybody doing today? I'm feeling so good when I look out at how many people arrived today. When I first organized this event, I was expecting maybe 5 or 6 of my buddies chanting through the streets with me. So this makes me feel really good inside. Thank you guys. First off, I would just like to acknowledge that we're standing here as guests on Coast Salish territory. I acknowledge that because they've been stewards of this land and continue to be for thousands and thousands of years before us. You guys are awesome. Okay, anyway, so just to give a quick little vision of the day, I just have a couple of guest speakers that are just going to say a few words for us. And I would ask that if anybody is up for it, I would really like to see as many people as possible have some duct tape that we have up here over their mouths during the speaker's talk so we can really feel what that feels like to be silenced. And then afterwards, before we begin our short little march, we're going to go up behind Thrifties and down the front road. We'll be chanting, and we'll come back here for a few songs, and then there'll be a little dance party afterwards to celebrate. If anybody wants to raise those vibrations really high and send them towards Harper's domain. I decided to organize this march not only because it infringes on our freedoms, our rights, our voices, but because I have a 2-year-old daughter. And when I see bills like this coming out, they don't really align with the vision I had for her growing up in this world. And I feel like the choices I make, the things I decide to defend and protect, I'll play a big part in the world she grows up in. We're here preparing the world for our children, for our grandchildren. I don't like the way things are going with our country. We stand here together to protest that and to demonstrate how we envision the world to be. So first up I have... Thanks, guys. First up I have longtime Islander, community leader, activist Joe Ackerman going to say a few words. So Joe, if you could come. Thank you.
Feels like I've been in this park a lot over the last 8 months or so with people like you gathered here, so thanks again for coming out. Is that, okay, that's better, okay. So my name is Joe Ackerman. My traditional ancestral name is Tlaquilton through Cowichan tribes. I would also like to acknowledge Coast Salish territory that we're all standing on, Sinchothan and Hokomitum speaking peoples. And a lot of what we accomplished over the previous 8 months with Grace Islet were accomplished by people like you coming out and gathering and standing up for our collective rights. I'd like to just speak a few words on what this means to First Nations as far as the legislation that the Stephen Harper government would like to enact on us all. So there's obviously a lot of opposition from First Nations leaders. The Grand Chief of the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, Stuart Phillip, who is a longtime activist, and great leader, is worried about how the constitutionally protected and enshrined rights of Aboriginal people in this country will be affected by this legislation. It's their duty to stand up, their culturally and morally appointed duty to stand up against the desecration of sacred areas, the exploitation of the natural spaces of air, land, and water, plants and animals. All of that is very important, obviously, to First Nations and continues to be, and is important to all of us as citizens. Also, Grand Chief Terry Perry Bellegarde of the Assembly of First Nations had some very good words in the media lately as well. And I think I'm going to pull those out to make sure that I don't miss anything there. So these are his words. We have been subjects of surveillance and suspicion and seen as a threat for as long as this country has existed. Why? Because our cultures, values, and laws place a priority on protecting the lands and waters. They place primacy on sharing and sustainability. This generation is not going to forsake our ability to protect our lands and territories and rights that has ensured our survival for thousands of years. And I also just want to share that I find it ironic that of late, and God bless their families and their loss, but a couple of individuals being killed by certain people and labeled as terrorists. And there's a whole discussion that can take place on that, but I think Harper's taken this as an opportunity. The recent shootings at the Parliament Hill in Ottawa and a couple of others, taking this as a political opportunity to enact this legislation that is attempting to silence us all. And that's not right. And the reason that's not right, there's 1,200 plus murdered and missing Aboriginal women in this country, and he says that that is not a priority. So obviously I think that is wrong, and one of the many reasons that is wrong. And so I think I'll give the opportunity for other people to speak more specifically to the obvious rights and freedoms that are going to be silenced by this legislation should it go through. So heights up, thank you all. I don't know who's next.
Yeah, hi. I was waiting to be introduced. You wanted to know how I should be introduced. And I didn't want to use anything other than I'm a fellow terrorist. My name is Chidakash, and I'm here wanting to become a member of this community. At the moment, I'm living on Galliano. I've always been extremely proud to be of this country. And the thing that I see is something a little more than just this bill. We're focusing very closely on this bill today, of course. But you know, the government of Canada doesn't exist. I don't know if you're aware of that. We don't have a government of Canada. That was changed immediately by Stephen Harper. We have the Harper government. That's what we have. And when you start out with that, and also he's declared that he's going to make Canada a new thing. When he's finished, we're not going to recognize Canada. He said that earlier on. And he's holding to that promise. He's, as everybody knows, I'm not saying anything other than the obvious, he's taking away all of the tools that we've used and set in place generation after generation to reflect our values. So he's taken us to war, and he's basically aligning himself, he's making us a part of the United States. The values that we hold aren't our values. The values that he's espousing are not our values anymore. And I look around at all the faces around you. Just take a look at each of you. And if you have some feelings about what's happening to the salmon, if you have some feelings about the pipeline, if you have some feelings about this bill that are not in alignment with Harper, actually he's not a government even. He's just Harper. His party doesn't really exist. It's just Harper. He says what's going to happen, and the party lines up behind him. It's just Harper. Okay? So if you have any feelings about anything that Harper does not support and does not promote, you are a terrorist under this bill. You are a terrorist under this bill. If you take any action, you are a terrorist. So look around at your fellow terrorists. He is effectively, with this bill, making everybody in Canada a terrorist. And when you think about it, the way he started out, he has put everything into place that doesn't reflect who we are. At some point, we will have to speak up. We're going to have to move out. We're going to have to do something. Rather than the Canadian thing, which I used to say to people, which is like, oh God, I don't think that's a very good idea. What about you? Could you pass me the salt, please? You know, we've actually got to be moving, and we've actually got to be doing something. Because when someone has taken so many steps to disembowel our rights, ultimately he has to come to this place, which is what they've done in the States. They have to come to a place where they will silence you, us, me, all of us. Because anything that we're going to say is going to be for something that is right, for something that is principled, for something that reflects our values. And that is automatically a threat to Harper. And I'm not going to say the Harper government, it's Harper. So when you say reject fear, it's not fear we should be rejecting, it's Harper we should be rejecting. When we say no to the pipeline, this is correct, it's no to Harper. This is Harper. We've got one man in 33 million people who has decided where we will all go. So as we go out today walking, keep in mind that it's not just no to this one aspect of what Harper is doing to this country and to us and to you. It's Harper that we're rejecting. Thank you.
What a wonderful turnout. Somebody up there is looking after the weather, obviously. My name is Harry Warner. I've been on the island for a while. And I came to Canada because it was a free country. And I can see that it no longer is that. To give you an example, very close to home, when we were organising this Bonnie Jean was organising it today, somebody suggested that we get an RCMP permit to walk around town. That's the beginning of it. That's the beginning of the end, the beginning of the loss of freedom. So let's show them in Ottawa and our dear friend Harper that no means no. Thank you.
So next up we have Jan Slacko. She is a lifetime peace and environment activist. So she has a few words to share. Thanks.
Mainly so impressive to see how many people care. Thank you very much. And thank you to Bonnie Jean and Lead Now for organizing these across Canada today. The bad news is this Bill C-51 is very likely to go through. I think it's already passed through Parliament. And already, even before this bill, we've seen so many human rights violations. So the question is, what do we do? And policing has its place. Policing is sort of along a continuum. At the one extreme is militarized policing. At the other extreme is community-based policing. And I think the community-based is a much better model for policing in general. But each of us can make this place safer, can do something about security. So there's an image I'd like to share and a story. The image comes from the film Northern Greece, which, raise your hand if you've seen it. Great film. It's available if you haven't seen it at Island Escapades for just $10. Watch it and then share it with other people. One of the scenes in there is at the Sacred Headwaters. And there's a helicopter in the background, and it looks like this RCMP officer is coming out of the helicopter. And one of the Beyond Boarding members, Tamo Campos, is speaking with him, walking towards the group. And to me, that's a beautiful image of what I'm wanting to say is I think what the ground for making us safer is connecting with each other as best we can, connecting with the light in each other. The story I want to share comes from April 2001. It's there was a big Free Trade of the Americas protest in Quebec City, and I was living in the Maritimes then. A busload of us came out, and a friend of mine invited me to join this group. It was called the Living Waters Group. Starhawk was there. We ambled around, didn't know where we were going, and ended up in this dark, dead end, which came to feel like a cathedral to me. At the end of it was the fence, which the protesters were not to cross. We weren't even supposed to come close. Somebody had broken the fence down, and so there were police there with tons of riot gear blocking us. And they didn't want us there. They said, "We're going to throw tear gas if you stay." So some of us started yelling, "Shame, shame, shame." And then someone from the Living Waters group called back, "Shh." So we all stopped yelling. And then someone said, "Sit down." We all sat down. So the police, if they were going to throw tear gas at us, would be throwing it at people sitting down, doing nothing to harm them. And there was obviously discipline in the group, and we had this beautiful chant going as well. They didn't throw the tear gas, and it was a real moment of connection. The Living Waters group tried to give them a copy of the Cochabamba Water Declaration, but they said, "No, we can't take anything for you." Going back home on the bus, then we were talking about horrible things we had seen the police doing. And we realized, of course, the police would be doing the same thing amongst themselves, talking about horrible things they had seen protesters doing. So it was pretty obvious we needed to connect with each other. And luckily, people in Halifax did that. When George Bush was coming to visit, many in the peace movement thought, "We can't stay silent. This is a war criminal coming to visit." So they organized a big protest. But they connected with the police first. It wasn't easy, but in the end, the police had pamphlets they were handing out. And the pamphlets explained their responsibility as police to protect any visitors and just keep the public safety. Also, the rights of citizens to speak out and protest. So they, instead of being behind a wall of riot gear, were handing out pamphlets to the protesters. The protest march was led by Muriel Duckworth in her 90s, and they specifically avoided going near where the CIA sharpshooters were. So there are times to connect and other times not to. It was a wonderful march. So I know we're going to have a wonderful one here. It's beautiful already. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Do we need to say anything more, Bonnie Jean? Yeah. Maybe about the petitions. There are petitions on the table, and my mom in blue back there has petitions as well, if you want to sign.
All right, we have two more people going to offer just a few more words before we take this to the streets. So first up, we have John Davies here, who happens to be a lawyer, part-time lawyer, full-time friend.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. This is amazing, and what really boosts my spirits these days is the number of people across this country from all walks of life. Some very prominent educated people have stood up across this country and are taking really strong positions on what is a very crucial watershed turning point in our country. What is law? What is a terrorist, and what can we do? Law, like any other tool, can be used as a shovel to till the soil, to fertilize and grow good things, or it can be used as a sword, as an instrument to hurt our brothers and sisters. We're standing on native land, and I acknowledge that it was the laws of Canada that created residential schools and took this land away from the people that lived here. It was the laws of England that started this whole process in Canada. We speak about our great democratic tradition. What do we mean by that? We talk about the Magna Carta 1,000 years ago. A few years ago, I was in London, England, looking for my grandmother's birthplace, and I was standing in front of a chapel, and there was a plaque that said, On this place 300 years ago, it's not that long ago really, the King of England had the Archbishop in a basket over an open fire, roasting him to make him change his mind. So who are the terrorists? Governments are the greatest terrorists. Governments have killed hundreds of millions of people across the world and are still doing so. We talk about 6 million Jewish people killed by the German government. At the same time, 6 million East Indians died of starvation because the British took their food away for the war effort. Governments are terrorists. Governments also, like any other instrument, produce good, can be beneficial. What is Bill C-51? Bill C-51 is, in my view, a law that Harper is determined to pass before the election. Why is that? Because it gives him the tools to get at his enemies. He's shown that tendency since he took office. He's in love with himself. The first thing he did was take down all the pictures in the Parliament lobby of the former prime ministers and replace them all with pictures of himself. That tells you the kind of personality we're dealing with here. And then the news was full of reports of him targeting people, keeping people out of meetings because he had labeled them as not being his supporters. Bill C-51, the last thing I read, and I don't read too much information because it's overwhelming, was that 17 federal government ministries will no longer have to keep our affairs secret and private and confidential. The Prime Minister's office, let's call it Harper's office, last count I heard had 300 people, or was it 400 people employed in it. Is that more than the number of legislators that we elect? I wouldn't be surprised if it was. Those people are in charge of suppressing opposition. Now imagine CSIS agents or Prime Minister's agents in 17 government ministries. I wouldn't be surprised if they're already there waiting for these new powers to be given to them so that they can share information about you and I with Mr. Harper and his 300 employees who are there to suppress opposition in the next election. They've shown a very clear tendency to suppress election opposition. That's, to me, what is underlying this bill. You heard it here first because I haven't read it anywhere, and maybe it's just my paranoid mind, but if I were thinking like Mr. Harper, that's what I would be doing. I would be looking to target people. How are those people going to be targeted? Well, you can take comfort in the fact that Bill C-51 says that the agents cannot rape you or murder you. Bill C-51, from what I hear, also says that the agents can disrupt your air travel, disrupt your bank account, wipe out your computer hard drive. And now what's left in between those and the rape and murder? Pretty well anything you can imagine. Our RCMP have in the past engaged in false flag operations, burning a barn, blowing up a shed, and who knows what else. Who produced the so-called ISIS video about the West Edmonton Mall? Who really set up the shooting at the War Memorial? I mean, what greater PR stunt can you imagine from Mr. Harper's point of view than to allow or encourage or set up some deranged person to attack a war memorial? It was beautiful PR. Who benefited? Harper benefited. His standing went up in the polls. What does that tell you? Government terrorism works. Scare people, put fear into people. What's our greatest weapon? Our greatest weapon is love. Not law, but love. Because if we get caught up in the fear and the hate, we're playing the same game. We're going down to that level, and that's exactly what people that we call psychotics or power mongers or dictators or fascists want us to do, is to engage them in the battle, because on the battle of fear, they can win. That's how they win. That's how they control the population. If you watch the polls, when the fear comes out, people are scared. They want a savior. They want a dictator. So who was the world's first terrorist that I can think of? Who was it that an empire executed 2,000 years ago because the empire perceived that person to be a threat? JC, Jesus Christ, because, well, was he a terrorist? We don't know for sure, but there's certainly a spiritual side to the story, but the political side to the story was the empire wanted him gone because he had too great a following or for whatever reasons. That's, to me, what we're all being exposed to at this point. You know, who invented concentration camps? The British did in the Boer Wars in Africa, where they rounded up the Afrikaners. I take some comfort in knowing that if I'm in a concentration camp, at least all my friends will be there and we'll sing songs. But, you know, these things are not history. Residential schools are not history. The survivors are among us. The pain and suffering is among us. So let's just stand together and encourage and love one another. Be strong in spirit. Not fall to the divisions. Praise Allah, praise Jesus, praise Buddha. Whatever your spiritual faith is, let's all be together as one in compassion and not hate, not fall into the fear. Thank you.
All right, our last speaker is a very special guest we have here today, MLA Gary Holman.
Hi everyone. I didn't come here intending to speak here today. I came just to stand with you. I heard there was a gathering of terrorists, so I thought I should come and join you. I felt it was important to have just a physical presence here, and wow, this is just amazing, the number of people who have come up. And you know, I know this is being organized in a fairly short period of time, and look at everyone is here. And this is a federal matter, so I'm not familiar with the details of the legislation. I do know in very, very rough terms, though, it's very anti-democratic. Randall Garrison is the federal NDP critic in the area, and in committee, Randall's questions very clearly demonstrated that the legislation that we already have on the books now federally is more than enough to deal with any so-called terrorist threats. We do not need more legislation. We know, of course, that Elizabeth May has been one of the strongest antagonists around this legislation, speaking out against it, doing a great job in Parliament. You know, as Canadians, we're pretty law-abiding people. Canadians, we're peaceful for the most part. We're very respectful. We even line up in long lines to sign petitions. You know, we're very respectful. We're very law-abiding. This legislation is not necessary in Canada. It's un-Canadian in my view. You know, I'm not a rhetorical type. I'm not a. People who know me know I'm, you know, kind of quiet, behind the scenes kind of guy. This legislation is un-Canadian, in my view. It does not deserve the light of day. We have a right to dissent against unjust laws in this country. Just a little while ago, Grace Islet, so grateful to see Joe Wickerman here speaking. And I haven't acknowledged we're standing here in Coast Salish lands, and the whole Grace Islet initiative, and the provincial government has now decided to protect it. And there were people allegedly trespassing on Grace Islet. I allegedly was one of those persons. We have a right to dissent and oppose unjust laws and legislation in this country. So I look forward to joining my fellow terrorists and walking around Ganges today. But do remember that, and John said it. You know, it's not about just being angry and protesting. That is important, and there's so many places in Canada and British Columbia today where people like you are standing right here and opposing this unjust legislation. But remember, ultimately, you have the ultimate power, which is the power to vote. We are going to be having a federal election here in October. There will be candidates standing up on this issue. There will be a conservative candidate, and make sure that you challenge that conservative candidate. How the hell can you support legislation like this? Pretend to represent the people of this riding and support legislation like this. You go to those public meetings, you challenge that federal candidate, and you vote for the candidate who's going to do away with this legislation and a new government. Thanks everyone for coming.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. Who's that knocking at my door? Who's that marching all the signs? Who says Canadians should stand guard? It's the raging grannies who produced C-51 that plans to limit civil rights. Canadians need to have free speech for environmental fights. Who's going to listen to our phones? Who's going to check emails and tweets? Who's going to arrest brave guardians when we should have free speech? Who's that knocking at my door? Who's that taking me away? Who says that people cannot stand on guard for our native land? Stand up for our rights! Woo!
Rip that tape. Okay, everybody, rip that tape off. We have one thing that we can do, okay? Are we gonna... It comes down to one thing. Are we gonna allow Harper to do this to us? What's that? Are we gonna allow Harper to do this to us? No, we're not. So everybody join me, okay? Hey, hey! Ho, ho! C-51 has got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! C-51 has got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! C-51 has got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! C-51 has got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! C-51 has got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho!
C-51 has got to go! C-51 has got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! C-51 has got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! C-51 has got to go! C-51 has got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! C-51 has got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! C-51 has got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! C-51 has got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! C-51 has got to go!